Ableton Live gives you tons of ability to mangle and morph and change a sound. But one of the things that have really increased my ability to create unique, interesting sound design is parallel processing. So when we're talking about serial processing, we're talking about taking a sound, like let's say it's a track in Ableton Live, and then it goes through some type of effect, right? Like let's say an audio effect where you have a chorus, a delay, reverb, flanger, whatever it might be. Well, what's happening here is it's going through each one of those effects one at a time. So it goes through the chorus, then the chorus sound, then goes into the delay, and then the delay effect that's been added goes into the reverb, and so on. So you get this original sound here, goes through step by step, one into the next, and it creates your outputted sound. Well, parallel processing is quite different. Parallel processing takes that sound and then can separate it over multiple different versions of itself. It's now in parallel. So let's say in this image we have a chain here, this blue one, which is an EQ and a reverb. Then this darker blue one goes into an EQ and a delay, and so forth. That way, this delay is only happening within this chain, which happens to be only the mid-range. And then that all gets put together in the output to the final output. This gives you a huge ability to create very unique sounds, very interesting way of layering effects or controlling your effects to create a whole new way of processing your signal. So now that we know what parallel processing is, I'm going to show you a few different awesome techniques that I like to use with parallel processing. Very simple example to start is I'm going to play this. And let's say I want to just throw in an audio effect rack. I'm going to open up the chains list. And in here, right now, it's basically the signal's coming in, it's going out, nothing's happening. But let's put like an EQ3 here. As soon as I do that, I have a chain. It goes into this EQ3 and it exits. Well, let's rename this top, and then I can right click to create another chain and create another chain. Now, right now you might notice it's way louder than it was before because I have 3 chains that basically have very little change to them. But if I come in here and, for instance, turn these off, let's just rename that high, and this could be mid, this could be low. Now I'm just going to put another EQ3 here, and another EQ3 there. And let's make this just the mid, and make that just the low. Now I can solo this. We're just mid, just highs and lows. So it's taken that signal, separating into 3 different bands, and then it outputs it over here, right? Well, if I wanted to, I can then add any effects to this. But this is the very basics of parallel processing. I like to use this a lot if I'm doing something like maybe I want to add a simple delay just to my high range. And then we can do whatever we want with just those 3 specific bands, right? Now that we know the basics of parallel processing, let's look at specific techniques of using this in our sound design. Now the first one we're going to look at is parallel compression. So I have this sound. Let's say I take a compressor. Let's see. Put it on there. Go with something like that. I'm just going to tweak these a little bit. This is good, but it's kind of pumping a little bit. You might hear how it's not really letting through the sound that I'm looking for. What I can do is I can group this. Now it's in series, right? It's just going right into the compressor and then out, but let's rename this compressor I'm going to create another chain, dry. Now right now it's just a lot louder because I've doubled up the signal. But if I put in something like an EQ8, and I'm adding an EQ to that compressed sound, what I'm trying to do is get kind of like an over compressed sound on my high end and a little my low end, but allow a lot of the transients in the middle to still come through. Now since I layered this, it's a lot louder, but it has a lot more kind of crunch in those ranges. I can adjust the volumes a little bit to make up for that. Let's turn that on and off. Turn the volume of that one up a little. Let's really compress this to give it a nice crunch sound. So that's off. This is on. Well, this is the very basics of a New York style compressor. So if I turn this off, it just sounds kind of muddy and overcompressed. But now with that layer, this is good to go. I also have a more advanced version of this New York style compressor. It's going to be a collection of all the different presets I'm going to put together, and it's going to be in the link of this video description or below. You can check that out and download it. Let's look at the second way that we can use parallel processing. Second, we can use this is with EQing. So we can use parallel EQing. Great example of this is, let's say I want to add kind of a fullness to the sound, like a harmonic richness. I still want a lot of the upper harmonics or sounds to come through unaffected. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to group this to put it into an audio effect rack. I'm going to call this EQ chain. And then I'm going to right click, create a chain, and then call this harmonic distortion. Now what I'm going to do is add something like, let's say, I could add a little chorus to that and maybe a little overdrive. Or no, better yet, I'm going to add a little saturation.
I don't wanna give you up. I don't wanna hold you up.
Now I'm just listening to the harmonic distortion to get that done. It's just way too hot.
I don't wanna hold you up. I don't wanna beg you us. I just know that I had enough. I don't wanna give you up. I don't wanna hold
and what I can do is with the
I
EQ,
don't wanna beg you us. I just know that I had enough. I don't wanna
I'm really wanting to just take the top end of it, and then I can add the same type of EQ to this distortion.
I don't wanna give you up. I don't wanna hold you up. I don't wanna beg you us. I just know that I had enough. I don't wanna give you up. I don't wanna hold you up.
Cool, so now what I'm doing is with my EQ chain at the top, I still want a lot of the original to come through. And especially the high end, I really want the crispness of her vocals to come through. But with this second one, using a combination of EQ and effects, I'm really adding fatness and overall quality to the vocals that I really enjoy, but get rid of anything that might muddy up either the low end or the bright kind of. From here on is when you can really perceive the sound. Like, let's say you're at a club and her vocals coming over a speaker. Well, if I have too much chorus effect on the higher end, then it might be a little confusing to what she's saying. This way, it's a lot clearer.
I don't wanna give you up.
So this is with it off.
I don't wanna hold you up. I don't
It's
wanna
good,
beg you us. I just
but this
know
seems
that I
bigger.
had
It still has the
enough.
clarity. And this is an amazing way of using parallel compression for EQing. And I quickly mapped this together to give you a few features to easily affect it, and this is also going to be able to be downloaded when you follow the link. Now let's look at parallel processing and using MidSide EQing. This can be a really interesting way of controlling your sound. So let's say I have this. Let's turn up the speed. Now the first thing I want to do is drag in an EQ8, and I'm going to group it. One thing you can do actually is Control D or Command D to duplicate. So let's call this mid, let's call this side. I have a whole article on what MidSide is and how you can use it. I'm not going to go over that, but I'm going to show you some quick techniques of using parallel processing with it. And what I'm going to have to do is come in to my stereo mode and put it to MS, MidSide. So this one is mid, and then MS, set that to side. Now what this means is I can now EQ my mid and side separately. And I'm just going to EQ this to make it quite wide. And then I'm going to cut out a lot of my high end of my mids. Now what that is mid's the center sound, only things found in mono, and side is everything that is not mono. Well, this can be very interesting, especially if you've separated it, and then you do something like a big reverb. So I still have the low end coming through very distinctly, but I have this really big reverb on my sides. That's something else I can do is come in here. Let's just kind of reorient this a little bit. So now I have a very clear high end coming through of my mids and a low end, but then I have this very big sounding reverb that's kind of spraying out on the sides. Just to make sure that that happens too, I can come in and go to a utility at the end and increase the width. It's just making sure that this sound is being pushed out much wider than my mid. So if I turn this off, very much in the center, very clean, but now I have that same clarity with a bigger reverb. So that's how we can use parallel mid-side and reverb. So those are some techniques that I like to use with parallel processing. You can go down a super deep rabbit hole with this that can be really fun. Like what happens if you add a big saturation on the high end but not on the low end, or if you add saturation and reverb on the mid or high, and the low end you add a chorus effect. You can get very specific to what you're doing with your different ranges. You can also use these different EQing effects and so on to be very specific with your sound design and with how you use your effects. Parallel processing is incredibly powerful, and I highly suggest you use it. You can use it in unimaginable ways. It's super fun. Just try it out. Just throw different things at different ranges and see what you can make with it. If you follow the link in this video description or the link below, then you can download a few different presets that I've made using parallel processing and just tweak them and play with them in your own set. It's by donation or free. Just do whatever you want and use it. Let me know if you enjoyed these techniques or how you might have used parallel processing before.